For 500 years, one single dynasty presided over this incredible era of military power, scientific genius, and cultural innovation. We call it Islam's Golden Age. They were the Abbasids, and even though they get kind of overlooked today, their story is honestly one of the most dramatic in all of world history.
So, here's the big question, right? How does an empire built on science and culture just vanish? That's what we're going to dig into. It's this epic story of how this incredible dynasty soared to unimaginable heights, only to come crashing down in one of the most destructive events of the entire medieval world. It's a tale of revolution, genius, and, well, ultimately a catastrophe. All right, so our story kicks off not with a golden age, but with a bloody, brutal revolution. See, the Abbasids didn't just inherit their empire, they seized it.
And this slide, it really lays it all out. On one side, you've got the ruling Umayyads. Their banner is white, and they're seen as this out-of-touch, decadent Arab elite. But on the other side, the Abbasid revolutionaries, flying black banners. They built this huge coalition by claiming a more direct blood tie to the Prophet's family and promising a return to true Islam. And that message, it hit home for so many non-Arab Muslims who felt like they were being treated as second-class citizens.
So how'd they pull it off? Well, first, you have decades of the simmering resentment that just finally boils over. Then, a brilliant general named Abu Muslim emerges and harnesses all that anger, kicking off a revolt from the frontiers. It all comes to a head at the Battle of the Zab River in 750. And for the Umayyads, it was an absolute disaster. Their army was crushed, their leader was killed, and the Abbasids hunted down the rest of the dynasty to make sure they stayed in power. A new era had begun. So with the old rulers gone, the Abbasids didn't just move into the old palaces. No, they built something completely new, and they centered it around a magnificent capital that would become their legacy. In the year 762, the Caliph al-Mansur founded Baghdad. And listen, this wasn't just another city. It was a statement. This city of peace was built from the ground up to be the center of the world. And you know what? For a long time, it was. Now, at the absolute heart of Baghdad's intellectual life was the legendary House of Wisdom. You have to understand, this wasn't just a library. It was an engine of knowledge. Scholars from all over the known world, Christians, Jews, Muslims, they all came here to translate the great works of the Greeks, the Persians, the Indians, all into Arabic. They saved countless texts from being lost to history forever. And this melting pot of ideas just created this incredible explosion of progress. They got paper-making technology from China, which suddenly made books cheap and accessible. Thinkers like Al-Khwarizmi were literally inventing the foundations of algebra. In fact, our word algorithm comes from his name. The whole place was a cosmopolitan hub, sitting right on the Silk Roads, pulling in wealth and new ideas from everywhere. And if you want to put a face to this era, it's gotta be this guy, Caliph Harun al-Rashid. He's the caliph you read about in 1001 Nights. The legends paint him as this ideal king, pious, super wise, and so dedicated that he would supposedly wander the streets in disguise just to see how his people were really living. And if you really want to grasp just how far their influence reached, get this. Harun al-Rashid sent a diplomatic gift to the most powerful ruler in Europe at the time, Charlemagne. But it wasn't gold or silk. It was an elephant, an actual living elephant named Abu Abbas that journeyed all the way from Baghdad to the court of the Franks. Now that is a power move. But you know how these stories go. Even at its absolute peak, the seeds of the caliphate's destruction were already being sown. And the fractures didn't come from some outside enemy, they came from within. Okay, so let's talk about the Mamluks. To secure their own power, the caliphs started to rely on this elite class of Turkish slave soldiers. They were bought as boys, trained relentlessly, and they became the most feared warriors in the empire. And here's the key. They were personally loyal only to the caliph. This was a powerful tool, for sure, but also a really, really dangerous one. It's like the old Praetorian Guard problem from Rome. What happens when the bodyguards realize they're the ones holding all the swords? Well, they often decide they should be the new bosses. And the decline was like a series of dominoes falling. It all started with a nasty civil war between Harun al-Rashid's own sons that just tore the empire apart. This weakness made future caliphs lean even heavier on their Mamluk guards, which pushed away the old Arab and Persian elites. Pretty soon, the bodyguards became the masters. Turkish generals started assassinating caliphs they didn't like and putting puppets on the throne. And with all that chaos at the center, the empire just shattered. Local governors basically said, you know what, I'm in charge here now, and declared independence. So by the 10th century, you end up with this totally bizarre situation. The Abbasid Caliph still had the title. He had the palace, he had the prestige, but he had zero actual power. He was basically a prisoner in his own capital, completely controlled by his own military commanders.
The caliphate was essentially a hollow shell, and then a storm started brewing in the east that was about to shatter that shell completely. We're talking about the Mongols, and their advance was just terrifyingly fast. It started with Genghis Khan in 1219, and then it became this unstoppable tidal wave under his grandson, Hulagu Khan. By 1258, after smashing everything in their path, his massive army was standing right at the gates of Baghdad itself. Now the last caliph, Al-Mustasim, he made a fatal mistake. I'm sure he'd heard the horror stories about the Mongols, but he believed his city, the great city of Baghdad, was invincible. So when Hulagu Khan demanded his surrender, he refused. It was the last decision an independent Abbasid caliph would ever get to make. What came next was a week of just unimaginable horror. As this chronicler from the time describes, the city was systematically wiped out. The population was massacred. The grand libraries, the palaces, the mosques, all burned to the ground. 500 years of civilization erased in a matter of days. The city was gone. The caliph was dead, rolled up in a carpet and trampled to death by horses so no royal blood would be spilled. So, what was left? After all that, what is the legacy of this fallen empire? The most heartbreaking symbol of the destruction is what happened to the libraries, including that amazing House of Wisdom. All of those books, centuries of science, philosophy, poetry, were just dumped into the Tigris River. They say the water literally ran black from the ink of all that dissolving knowledge. An entire intellectual world just washed away. But here's the thing, not all of it was lost. Because of all the work that had been done during the Golden Age, classical Greek knowledge from people like Aristotle was preserved, and it was eventually passed back to Europe, where it helped spark the Renaissance. Their foundational work in math and medicine and astronomy had already changed the world. Their real legacy wasn't just in the buildings of Baghdad, it was in the ink that had been copied and carried far beyond the city's walls. In the end, the story of the Abbasids is just this powerful reminder of how brilliant a civilization can be, and also just how fragile it all is. It really leaves us with a heavy question for our own time. How do we protect our own collective knowledge from the storms that we know will inevitably come?